The moon rode high and broken over the twins, scattering shards of pewter light across the churning waters of the Green Fork. The keeps themselves, two squat monoliths of gray stone lashed together by their timber bridge, seemed less a fortress than a wound upon the river, an ugly graft of Fry ambition clawed into the skin of the Seven Kingdoms. From the battlements, the wind carried the sour scent of old onions, stale wine, and fear, always fear, for the halls of Walder Fry had stunk of it since the night of the Red Wedding. Arya Stark had smelled it in her dreams, even across the sea in Bravos. It dragged her back over tossing waves, back across the poisoned salt marshes of the Neck, back to Westeros, to the dead hearth of her murdered family. She slipped ashore at Saltpan's half-starved, half-feral, armed with nothing but needle and the memories of 1,000 shifting faces. She followed rumors of Fry patrols like a hunting cat, skirting their camps, studying their habits. Each passing league tightened the coil of vengeance inside her until it sang like drawn wire. The many-faced god had tried to teach her to let names drift away like leaves on a current. Arya clung to them instead, stitching them into a cloak of thorns. Walder Fry, Black Walder, Lothar Fry, Walder the Fat, Aegon Rivers, bastard of Derry, whose crossbow bolt felled Robb's wolf in the menagerie of slaughter. Names, names, names. Everyone a blade meant for her hand. Winter rode too, pacing beside her on iron-shod hooves. The roads were empty but for refugees and carrion birds, and soon even the birds grew bold enough to wait in the open, hopping on crooked legs across corpses not yet cooled. Once, a small boy in shabby leathers asked if she were bound for Riverrun. He had the look of a camp follower with no camp left standing. Arya shook her head and pressed on toward the twins, because vengeance could not hide behind castle walls. It had to bloom where the blood was spilled. At daybreak on the 10th day of her march, the river mists parted, and the twins rose before her at last. Twin towers scarred the sky, doors yawning black under rusted portcullises. Men in blue-gray cloaks patrolled the parapets. A column of wagons rattled up the causeway. Day's rations for the garrison, mutton and root vegetables, casks of ale. Arya studied them from the willows. Her plan, simple in the telling, treacherous in the doing, was to follow a cart through the postern, vanish amid the storerooms, then climb unseen toward the high hall where Lord Walder cursed and sniffed and wiped spittle on his spotted sleeves. She wore the face of a river girl this morning. Sallow skin, crooked teeth, hair hacked short with a carving knife. Needle she lashed flat beneath her arm. She practiced a limp, because servants who limped drew fewer glances than those who prowled. When the last wagon creaked within 20 yards of her hiding place, Arya breathed once, shallow and sharp, then moved. The path she chose was a seam of shadows beneath the stone apron of the outer wall. She darted from bush to barrel, ducked low when a guard turned his head, and slipped behind the tailgate an instant before the driver cracked his whip. Hooves clattered, chains groaned, and the world narrowed to the stench of turnips and wet straw. Her heart kept time with the wheels. 2 beats, then a skip third, 2 beats, then the hollow catch. She counted portcullises, first outer gate, second inner. Then they were coughing torch smoke while the drawbridge to the eastern tower rattled shut, sealing her inside the belly of the Fry stronghold. She waited until the unloading began. When the drivers cursed the weight and eased the first crates down, Arya flowed off the bed, shadow thin, and merged with a tangle of serving girls bearing slop pails. No one looked twice. The twins had too many servants to name, and too many Walder offspring scrambling for scraps of power. She climbed spiral stairs that smelled of tallow and piss, rose past barracks and larders, always upward toward the sound of distant laughter. A cracked, wheezing, hateful laughter she heard only in nightmares. Half a landing from the high hall, a supple hand closed on her forearm. The grip was gentle, the voice colder than Blackwater ice. "Wrong door, little mouse." Arya snapped her head up. The hand belonged to Ser Enys Fry, 8th son of Lord Walder by his 3rd wife. He wore a wine-stained doublet, and his breath stank of onions and lust. His eyes crawled over her like beetles. "Kitchen's 3 levels down," he said. Leaning close enough, she felt the wetness of his spittle. "The whores sleep on the west side. Unless you've coin for a bed, best scuttle back to the scullery. He squeezed. Arya's lip jerked. For half a heartbeat she considered driving needle into the softness below his ribs. But swords made noise, and screams made more. Instead she dipped her head. "Beg pardon, lord," she muttered in a thicker Riverlands croak. "Thought the wine cellars was this way." "Wine, is it?" He chuckled, a pig's grunt. "Fetch me a flagon, and I might forget this trespass." He released her. Arya backed a pace, curtsied low, then spun, intending to vanish down the next stair. She took 2 steps and felt the knife punch between her shoulder blades. White heat exploded through her chest. Her vision tilted. Inez's voice floated on a dream. "Can't have spies wandering the tower. Father's orders." His dagger slid out. A dampness spread beneath Arya's tunic, warm as summer rain. She tried to breathe and tasted iron. The walls blurred. Needle clattered from numb fingers. Inez wiped his blade on her sleeve. "Bleed quiet now, girl. The rats will dine well tonight." He left her curled beside a guttering sconce, blood pooling in mortar cracks. Footsteps receded. Somewhere far away, Arya Stark of Winterfell understood she was dying. Here, in a Frey stairwell, nameless, faceless, far from snow and pine, the realization was a knife sharper than the one in her back. She clawed at the stone, dragging herself inch by inch toward the shadows. Every movement wrenched molten pain through lung and spine. Still she crawled, refusing the darkness, until at last she folded into a recess beneath the stairs. There, amid spiderwebs and dust, Arya's heartbeat faltered. But death, when it came, found no peace waiting for her. Only a face. Lady Catelyn's face, gray and weeping, throat carved and lips mottled blue. "Arya," the dead mouth whispered. "Child, vengeance." The river called then, cold and black. Arya sank. When her eyes opened again, they opened to night and rain, to trees thrashing above, to torches sputtering red glare across wet leaves. She lay on her back atop a litter of cloaks. Men circled in ragged silhouettes. Some carried bows, some axes. One wore a breastplate polished bright as a mirror. Another nursed a twisted arm in a splint fashioned from river reeds. All bore the same sigil, yellow circle on black field, a broken wheel, though many had gouged the circle so it bled into a half-sun, a torturer's wheel. Brotherhood without banners. Arya tried to speak. Her throat was raw, lungs afire. Instead, a dry rasp slithered out. "She lives," murmured a voice. Thuras of Myr crouched above her, his red robes plastered to skin by the rain. A hint of wine lingered about him still, but his eyes were clear as polished amber. Beside him knelt Lem Lemoncloak, brow furrowed beneath his yellow hood. "7 hells," Lem whispered. "How many times must the lady raise folk from death?" At the naming, Arya felt a tremor roll through the clearing. Leaves rustled without wind. The men stepped back, heads bowing. A figure emerged between tree trunks. A woman, tall but stooped, cloaked head to heel in sodden gray. Her hood cast deep shadows, yet lightning flared, bearing the ruin beneath. Her face was Catelyn Stark's, yet not skin waxen and stretched over bone. Cheeks ravaged by river rot, throat a red grin of stitched flesh. Her eyes glowed like drowned candles. Lady Stoneheart regarded Arya in silence. Thuras spoke instead. "There is magic strong in her," he said softly. "Your blood, my lady." Lady Stoneheart's gaze flicked to Thuras, then back to Arya. She raised a scarred hand and pointed. A single word tore from her ravaged throat, raw as grave dirt. "Daughter." The Brotherhood stirred. Arya tried to sit. Pain lanced down her spine, yet it was dull now, distant, as though seeping through cotton. Thuras pressed her back with a gentle palm. "You died, child," he said. "We found you at the Twins, pulse gone, blood cold. The lady bade us bear you away. Beneath the half-moon, she laid her lips to yours and breathed you back. She gave you her fire, the last embers of it. But such gifts carry price." Arya's lips trembled. "Mother!" Lady Stoneheart knelt. Rain braided through what remained of her auburn hair. She touched Arya's cheek. The fingers were ice. Beneath that touch, memories shuddered awake. Of Winterfell snows, of a mother's laughter, of baked apple scent and warm hearths. Arya's chest clenched. Tears blurred her sight. Different now, Thuras warned. The river took her years ago. The phrase treachery bound her to this world, wroth and unforgiving. She remembers little save wrongs to set right. And now, by her hand, so do you. Arya met her mother's hollow eyes. Something ancient moved behind them. Sorrow and wrath twined tight as thorn vines. She felt it seep into her veins, mingling with the chilled fire that had jump-started her heart. Her flesh prickled. The night grew ripe with unspoken oaths. Lady Stoneheart rose and offered Arya a dagger. A thin blade of Valyrian steel, dark as smoke, palest winter rose carved upon the pommel. Arya accepted without question. The weight felt borne to her grasp, as if forged from the void left by needle. She rolled to her knees, rain drumming her shoulders, and knew some part of the old Arya had indeed died on those stairs. What stood now was tempered in mother's blood, sharpened by death's own whetstone. Lem cleared his throat. The phrase feast tonight. Walders named a new grandchild heir and bids all the lesser lords drink and fawn. They'll be half drunk, bellies full. A hush settled as Arya climbed to her feet. She swayed but did not fall. Lady Stoneheart's hand drifted to rest upon her daughter's brow, a blessing of cold fury. "Take me back," Arya whispered, voice ragged yet edged with steel. "Open their gates. I'll carve the path." The Brotherhood looked to their lady. A croak like snapping ice escaped Stoneheart's slit throat. Approval, command, perhaps both. Then she turned, cloak swirling, and melted into the trees. One by one, the outlaws followed, torches smothered to embers. Arya limped after, new dagger glimmering ink-black at her side, eyes reflecting storm and flame. They struck 3 nights later under a harvest moon swollen as a bloodshot eye. The twins stood quiet behind raised portcullises, secure in the notion that cold walls and deeper waters kept vengeful ghosts at bay. Yet ghosts are cunning. They wade where flesh may drown. Lem led a knot of men upriver in stolen fry skiffs, braving currents while Thuras muttered prayers that stank of myrrh and red wine. When the moon crowned midnight, Arya slid into the water, dagger clenched between teeth. The chill bit like grave fingers, but her new blood answered with colder fire. She swam beneath pilings, breached inside the smaller tower's postern, and strangled the lone sentry before his breath left fog on the air. Corridors lay near empty. Half the garrison feasted in the West Hall, the other half Abed. Arya padded barefoot, dripping river sludge across flagstones. She kept to shadows yet did not fear discovery. Discovery meant steel, screaming, the crack of ribs under fury, all the red music she had come to conduct. But she had learnt patience. A wolf cub teethes long before its first kill. Tonight she would choose her moment. On the stair where she had died, she found Ser Ines Fry relieving himself in a tarnished chamber pot. He held a wineskin in his free hand, humming a bawdy tune about a Volantine lacemaker. Arya watched him sway, face flushed, until his gaze rose and locked on hers. "You?" he choked. Ill splattered the stair. "I gutted you." Arya said nothing. She raised a finger to lips that barely curved, then sprang. He fumbled for his dagger. Too slow. Her Valyrian knife punched into the soft hollow beneath his chin and out through the crown of his skull. His eyes bulged in exquisite surprise. Arya felt nothing of it, no victory, no relief, only a steady, glacial certainty. She eased him down, wiped the blade across his doublet, and moved on. In the West Hall, candles burned low above grease-spattered trestles. Walder Frey's progeny sprawled in drunken knots. Black Walder with a girl half his age across his lap. Lothar jabbing a fork at some cousin's eye while ranting about tolls. Walder the Fat belching into an ewer. Symphonies of laughter rising and falling like sheets of tin in a gale. Lord Walder himself slumped at the head table. His wattled neck glistened with sweat. Crumbs of pigeon pie nested in his beard. Arya slipped behind a pillar and waited. Moments later, the doors at the far end flew wide. Lem and Thuras barged in with torches blazing. Behind them poured the Brotherhood. Archers, pikemen, women with daggers clenched in white fists. They formed a crescent around the hall, torches painting savage murals on the walls. The Freys froze where they sat, tongues thick with wine. Walder Frey squinted. Who dares? Arya stepped from the shadows and mounted the dais. The hush broke under a collective gasp. Frey eyes widened in seats of privilege, yet none knew her face. They saw only a girl in wet leathers, hair dripping black, dagger dark as midnight sin. Walder thumped his cane. Who are you, wretch? How did you breach my halls? Arya glanced at Thuras. He nodded once. The doors behind them groaned again, opening for Lady Stoneheart. A murmur rippled. Some recognized the corpse queen of River Rumor. Others saw only horror in human shape. Walder himself sucked air between dentures. Caitlin Stark, he breathed. By all seven. Stoneheart's voice scraped broken glass. Justice. She flung a thick coil of hemp. A noose knotted with black roses. Lem caught it and looped it round the nearest chandelier hook. Brotherhood men dragged benches into a makeshift scaffold. Walder stumbled back, cane clacking. My sons, kill them. But the sons were slow, dulled by feast. Arrows punched throats. Axes split skulls. Screams and steel clanged amid toppled wine cups. Arya leapt onto the trestle, skittering across overturned trenchers like a dancer on ice. She came down before Black Walder, whose blade still cleared leather. Her dagger flashed crossways, severing the tendons of his sword hand. He shrieked. She buried the black steel in his eye, yanked free, and felt warm spurts lace her cheek.
No traíem blund.
Only the hollow ticking of some inner clock. Lothar lunged, cleaver raised. Arya ducked, slit him stem to stern, and glided on while his guts tumbled like eels. Around her, Brotherhood blades reaped. The noose swayed above the carnage, waiting. Walder Frey tried to flee along a servant's passage. Thuras barred his way. Arya stalked near, step by measured step. Walder brandished his cane as though it were a spear. What do you want? He croaked. Names, Arya whispered. All the names. She raked him from groin to gullet. His scream cracked like rotted timber. Lem hauled the old man thrashing toward the noose. The Brotherhood watched grimly as Walder sputtered blood, eyes rolling up. Lady Stoneheart raised a hand. Silence fell. She regarded her daughter, not with pride nor compassion, but with the cold satisfaction of debts repaid. Arya met the ruined gaze and felt a long dormant ember flare in her chest. Love, or its memory, bent now into another shape. Walder hung until his struggles stilled. The chandelier groaned. When Arya turned away, she found the hall strewn with silence. Freys dead, Freys dying, torchlight flickering over fresh rivers of red. Outside, dawn bruised the clouds violet. The twins smoked behind them as the Brotherhood rode forth, driving surviving kin, maids, squires, into the wilderness.
Arya rode beside Stoneheart.
No words passed. None were needed. The unfinished ledger of their grief stretched on before them, names scrawled in invisible ink upon dawn's pale ledger. Lannister, Bolton, Karstark betrayers, Frey stragglers. Vengeance was a road with no forks, only graves. Yet as miles fell away under hooves, Arya's thoughts strayed north, beyond the ruins of Winterfell, beyond the wall's cracked bones, to Jon, to Sansa, to Bran in the cradle of roots. Could she return as this thing half alive? Could she face them with a mother's rage coiled in her veins, with death's murmur in her ear? The question gnawed but found no answer. For now there were names to find, and the dagger's whisper drowning all else. The wind shifted. In its keening, Arya heard a woman's laugh once bright, now warped by river chill. She could almost taste hot cider and cinnamon, almost feel soft hands braiding her hair in the godswood. But those memories lay beneath the water with the girl she had been. Above the surface rode Lady Stoneheart, her daughter beside her, eyes forward, knives singing. and the north wide open like a wound yet to be cauterized. So the new Lady Stoneheart crossed the trident under a bleeding sky, and if the crows that followed sounded strangely like wolves, no man in the Riverlands found courage to remark upon it. The hunt had only just begun. Dawn bled pale across the sky as the Brotherhood, without banners, abandoned the smoking husks of the twins. Behind them the river swirled, greedy and green-black, gulping down flakes of ash that drifted like winter gnats. None of the outlaws spoke. They rode single file through reed-choked floodplains where the ground squelched beneath hoof and boot, every sucked-up footstep echoing like the whispered curses of Freys newly flung to judgment. At the column's head rode Lem in his tattered yellow cloak, hound-faced and hollow-eyed from sleepless nights. Beside him padded Thuras of Myr, red robes clinging wetly to his ample frame, his sword-staff a dim ember in the first light. Behind them shuffled the wounded and the weary, and in their midst rode two figures who drew every furtive glance. Arya Stark, reborn, remade, or ruined, for all three words felt equal upon her tongue, sat astride a rangy river mare. The beast had belonged to Black Walder once. Now its reins lay slack in Arya's gauntlet fist. Her sodden leathers clung like another layer of skin, stiff with dried fry blood. Beneath the left armpit throbbed the puncture where Aenys's dagger had kissed her spine. Yet the pain felt distant, muffled, wrapped in frost. Of breathing she remained dimly aware, but each pull of air seemed borrowed, on loan from places past remembering. Needle was gone, lost the night she died. Yet the Valyrian dagger Stoneheart had gifted her rode her hip like an old companion, alive and humming whenever she brushed its pommel. Beside Arya rode Lady Stoneheart. She kept her hood up even in the chill of pre-dawn, but the damp could not hide the tatters of skin that sagged from her jaw or the angry welt of stitches corseting her split throat. Her graying hair matted against her cheeks in rain-slick ropes. Now and again her horse sidled nearer, as if pulled by some umbilical tether still binding mother to daughter. Yet her clouded eyes never softened, and whatever love lingered behind them sat shackled by a colder mandate, vengeance, ironclad and endless. They pressed northeast, following half-forgotten smugglers' tracks that scabbed the marshes. 2 days brought them to Fairmarket's outskirts, where the remnants of Peter Pimple's brigands roamed broken orchards, sacking farmsteads and leaving flayed corpses nailed to barn doors. Thuras proposed skirting wide. Lem disagreed, insisting the outlaws needed corn, wine, and fresh arrow shafts. Lady Stoneheart gave no audible counsel, only a twitch of her ruined lips, like a dead leaf stirring on stagnant water. The decision made itself. At nightfall the Brotherhood descended. Arya slipped through apple rows crusted with lichen, her body moving before thought could catch it. A mailed sentry whistled an off-key tune as he squatted behind a granary. The tune cut short when Arya's dagger brushed the soft hinge of his collar and slid home beneath the ear. She eased his corpse aside, tasting no satisfaction, only a mechanical necessity, as natural as exhaling. Nearby Lem's mace rose and fell in a wet rhythm. Gendry, yes, sweet stupid Gendry, thrust a new-forged spear through a brigand's back while shouting a prayer he'd half-learned from Thuras. Arya spared Gendry no more than a heartbeat's glance. The smith would learn soon enough that prayers break against steel. Within the hour, Fairmarket's ruins lay still, its brigands' red smear upon frost-dappled grass. Thuras herded villagers from cellars and haylofts, feeding them oatcakes from looted sacks, urging them toward Riverrun where Brynden Tully's banners were rumored still to fly. Arya watched the children, thin, soot-stained, staring with hunger or awe or fear, yet felt nothing pierce the ice dam behind her ribs. Once she might have pressed a heel of bread into a shaking palm, ruffled a sand-matted head. Now each small face blurred into the next, pale masks unworthy of names. She turned away before empathy could thaw. Later, deep in the gloaming, she huddled beneath a hawthorn hedge sharpening the Valyrian blade on a whetstone slick with lamp oil. The song of steel rasped soft as a cat's purr. Across the embers Lem and Thuras argued in low tones. "She grows colder by the hour," Lem muttered, jerking his chin toward Arya. "Not like the wild pup who once begged us for crumbs. I fear the lady's kiss took more than it gave." "Death's fire cannot be kind," Thuras replied. Every life it rekindles burns a piece of the soul for fuel. Beric grew thin, hollow, forgetful of his own name ere the end. Our Stark girl walks the same knife edge. Arya kept her head bowed but listened, each word etching itself behind her eyelids. A spark of anger fluttered. Why whisper as though I am deaf? Yet the spark died quick, smothered by an older ethos. She did not anger at facts. If the road to vengeance demanded pieces of her soul, so be it. Souls were soft things. Knives were iron. Stoneheart appeared then, gliding from the shadows without the crunch of frost under boot. She looked first to Arya, then beyond the campfire toward the cold blue horizon where the riverlands met northern heaths. She raised her clawed hand, crooked one decayed finger, and in a voice that grated like shale across glass spoke a single syllable. Moat. Thuris's eyes widened. Moat Kaelin? My lady, the neck is leagues distant. Stoneheart's finger descended, final as a judge's gavel. Lem grimaced but nodded. Arya slid the dagger home, rose, and shouldered her saddlebag. She understood. Walder Frey's line lay severed. Now another debt awaited northward. The Boltons, keepers of Winterfell, murdered wardens of the north, and beyond them, maybe, the lions still lurking in the west. Vengeance had a map, and every trail ended in a grave. They broke camp before dawn, riding through lowland bog where steam curled from black peat like the breath of sleeping giants. Ravens shadowed them, picking carrion in their wake, then flapping ahead as though guiding the column north. Arya counted a dozen at first. By midday, the murder had swelled to near 40, glossy feathers rucked against biting wind. Thuris swore they were omens. Arya thought only of eyes. Eyes to watch the land behind and eyes to watch the road ahead. For nights later, they reached the village of Hag's Mire, a half-drowned hamlet perched on spindly pilings above stagnant water. The reeds whispered of danger. Karstark spearmen had passed 2 days earlier, hunting wildlings said to roam south of the neck. Brotherhood scouts returned with word of a sister troop camped to the east, 50 under the command of Ser Hother Umber, Smaljin's bastard cousin, a sworn man to Drajan Karstark who flew Bolton Flademan banners in exchange for coin. Arya felt her pulse quicken at the name Umber. She remembered the great John at Robb's side, roaring oaths and hoisting direwolves on his shoulders. She remembered the Red Wedding, too, and the tales of Karstark treachery that threaded every northern camp. Another name for the list. That night, Hag's Mire's floating docks became a maze of death. Arya moved like mist, slipping between huts on stilts, crossing planks where moss muffled her footfalls. She smelled boiled crab, bilgewater, and fear. A Karstark sentry, black-bearded, thick-necked, leaned over a railing to piss into the mire. Her dagger snatched the grunt from his throat before the stream broke the water's surface. He toppled without splash, reeds swallowing the corpse. Elsewhere, Lem hacked open a pen of hogs, loosing them squealing through tents where half-drunk soldiers scrambled for blades they'd set aside to drowse. Chaos blossomed. Gendry and Angui fired arrows from a fisher's tower, shafts punching gleaming holes through mail. Stoneheart watched from a rickety catwalk, her pale face ghastly in moonlight, and every time a Karstark died her sewn lips twitched as though drinking steam from a cup. Ser Hother Umber strode from his pavilion clad in boiled leather and an umber red hand surcoat sewn over Bolton flayed man, a visual blasphemy that stirred bile up Arya's throat. He bellowed for order, swinging a spiked maul as tall as Arya herself. 2 of Thuris's men fell beneath that iron blossom. Arya ducked behind a netshed and considered her approach. A direct rush meant a shattered ribcage, a thrown blade too chancy in torchwind. She scanned the rigging above, rope pulleys, crab traps, lines sagging with waterlogged floats. There, a lantern swayed from a crossbeam. Arya climbed the piling's catswift, cutting the lantern rope with a flick. It crashed beside the Umber, oil splattering flame across his greaves. He howled, stamping. As his gaze jerked upward, she dropped, heels connecting with his shoulder from above, momentum wrenching the maul sideways. They rolled on slimy planks. He grabbed her wrist, fingers thick as tree roots. Arya drove her knee into his throat. Cartilage crunched and his grasp slackened. She wrenched free, danced back, and in one heartbeat flung the Valyrian blade in a tight underhand spin. It buried to the hilt between his gaping ribs. Ser Hathor staggered, spit foam, and collapsed with a thud that rattled the dock. Arya reclaimed her dagger, yanking it free in a lazy arc that sprayed black. She knelt, wiped the blade across his surcoat, smearing the flayed man beneath the red hand until both sigils merged in oily ruin. Gendry clambered down the pilings, panting, eyes wide. "Seven save us, girl," he croaked. "You're not a girl," Arya said, voice flat. "Not anymore." Dawn found Hag's Mire eerily quiet save for the creak of water beneath dock beams. The outlaws piled bodies, stripping boots and coin, then pushed the heap into the mire where gray bubbles swallowed screams and armor alike. The freed villagers thanked Thuras. The Red Priest waved them north toward White Harbor, promising safe passage under Brotherhood escort. Arya did not watch them depart. She hefted Umber's maul, gauging its weight, then discarded it into the mire. Too loud, too slow, too blunt for her rights. That night she dreamed of wolves. They loped across a snow-caked forest under ghost light, tongues lolling, silver eyes bright with hunger. One wolf bore her own face, yet older, leaner, streaked black down the muzzle. It stalked a white doe, antlers like bone wielded into antlers like steel. Just as the wolf sprang, the doe became Sansa, pale and terrified, and the wolf's jaws closed on empty air. Arya woke gasping, nails clawing moss. Dawn's chill could not explain the sweat on her brow. They skirted the outskirts of the neck for 9 days, weaving between causeways where will-o'-wisps danced over fetid pools. Scouts whispered of ironborn raiders prowling deeper marshes, driven inland after King Euron's fall in the west. Lightning Fork Glen burned green on the horizon one dusk, wildfire caches ignited by unseen hands. Rumors claimed Ramsay Bolton prepared Winterfell for siege against phantom dragons said to crawl from the ruins of Valyria. Arya cared little for dragons or Ironborn. Her eyes locked on a single picture. The Dreadfort's pink walls flayed of their sigils. Ramsay's crooked smile turned to crimson rictus. In the marsh hamlet of Greywater's Edge, they met Howland Reed's crannogmen. The frog-eaters glided silent atop narrow skiffs, crude bone mail rattling as they aimed poison reed darts from token bows. Lem bellowed parley. The crannogmen answered by surrounding the Brotherhood in a ring of boats, hulls bumping softly like whispering lips. From among them rose a woman no taller than Arya. Mira Reed, spear slung across her back, frog gig knife at her belt. Gray in her hair now, but her eyes still bright as tarnished bronze. "We know you," Mira said to Arya, tilting her head. "We fed you frog and lily root once, when your brother's pup guided us south of Moat Cailin." Arya searched her memory. A snapping turtle stew, Bran sleeping in a rusted cage, summer sun flickering through cattails. The recollection cut deep. Bran, little brother, wide-eyed dreamer. Where roamed he now? Up the broken wall, chasing ravens maybe. She swallowed. "I remember," she murmured. "You saved us." "I saved truths, not lives," Mira replied, gaze flicking toward Stoneheart hovering like winter frost behind Arya. "And what truth stalks our marsh now wears your mother's skin." Thuras stepped forward with palms raised. "We seek passage only, Lady Reed. Moat Cailin must fall if the north is to breathe free. The wolves shall rise against the flayed man." Mira eyed Thuras, then Stoneheart, then Arya. Rain pattered lily pads in dim circles. "Moat Cailin," she echoed quietly. "A wet grave for armies, even ghosts. Yet we share cause against Bolton scum. Come then, but heed our ways. Marshes swallow fools faster than swords." And so the Brotherhood followed Crannoc skiffs through labyrinthine channels where lamp eels glowed blue deep beneath black water and trees drooped moss like silken beards. Arya felt eyes in the rushes, frog hunters, children with blowpipes watchful as owls. At night, fires burned smokeless. During day, they wore bog camo of mud and reeds. She learned to step on tussocks that quivered like drumheads, to taste bark for iron in the sap that marked sinkholes. During these marches, Gendry sought Arya's side thrice, each time with words half-formed on his tongue. Apologies for leaving her in bravos. Laments for the girl he'd forged bull helmets with beside a smith's anvil. Each time Arya brushed him off with monosyllables until the smith's shoulders slumped and he drifted back to the rear guard. Her silence hurt him. She saw it in how his hammer fell slower on tent pegs at dusk. Some ember of the girl she'd been wanted to say sorry, to offer warmth. But warmth softened steel. Vengeance required tempered edges. On the 14th day, the marsh opened into a dreary plain, low and sodden. There stood Moat Cailin, a necklace of 3 squat stone towers, bastions once proud when the first men carved runes along their lintels, now blanketed by black vine and rot. Yet the moat remained, a hellish morass of suck mud, hidden palisades, and holes bored to gulp warhorses to the hips. Bolton flags flapped upon 2 towers. The third, eastmost, lay half-fallen, claimed by carrion crows. Reek-thin fog hugged the ground. Crannig elders whispered of malignant spirits lingering from 1,000 sieges. Arya dismounted and crouched behind wind-shorn heather as Mira pointed out kill zones. Here the mud deceives, there a pit bristles with spear. Thuras surveyed the looming keep, sighing long. Lem clutched his mace as though its handle were prayer beads. Stoneheart watched with that corpse stillness which unsettled even the bold. After a time she extended her ragged arm toward the tumble-down east tower, then etched a single letter in the mud with broken fingernail. Oh, Arya recognized it. An old Stark cipher meaning opening or weak point. Her heart beat quicker. She rose, wiping damp soil from her knees. "Give me 3 good archers and 1 rope," she said. Lem grunted. "What you plan, girl?" "Silence," Stoneheart rasped, shocking in its clarity. "Let her." Night fell like a funeral shroud as Arya crept across the killing ground. The bog devils, as northern men named Crannig folk, had taught her to move across peat mats lighter than a dragonfly's kiss. She harnessed every trick. Weights spread across toes, leather soles greased with eel fat to muffle suction, breath timed to the sigh of distant reed wind. Angui shadowed her left, bow half-drawn. Rennick Hay, a riverman archer, mirrored to the right. Behind padded a mute youth called Fern, rope coil over one shoulder. They reached the moat's edge, really a quagmire ring 200 paces wide, where submerged stake beds hid like teeth in gums. A plank causeway once bridged the mire, now broken, but its stumps jutted above ooze like vertebrae. Arya tested each stump before shifting weight, crossing as though walking a skeleton's spine. Twice her boot heel sank. Twice Fern's rope tightened under her arms, hauling her free before suction could claim her. At the tower's base, they paused beneath a curtain wall riven by age and root. Arya touched slick stone. Boltons had plugged larger gaps with timber and tar. Yet high above, where crenels crumbled, moonlight sneaked through a crack wide as a man's forearm. Arya gestured. Fern uncoiled rope, swung its weighted lead in slow circles, and after 3 passes launched it skyward. It vanished. A heartbeat later, metal clanged rock. He yanked, caught. Angui scrambled up first, spindly as a spider. Arya followed, dagger clenched in teeth, fingers numb on gritty rope. The ascent stretched forever. Each pull set her wound throbbing, yet cold fire pushed her. She heaved onto a narrow ledge inside what once might have been a rampart walkway. Rubble littered the path. The tower interior lay gutted. Floors collapsed, stair columns stripped for firewood. Far below, torchlight flickered faint where a pair of Bolton guards murmured over dice. Arya slithered down broken masonry, stones shifting under weight. One guard cocked his head, too late. Angui's arrow hissed into his throat. Rennick's followed, pinning the second through the eye. Dice scattered across flagstones. They opened the postern bar with care, hauling bodies into shadow. Brotherhood vanguards waded through the moat via rope lines anchored to the tower stump, pulling men 2 by 2. When Lem's boots touched stone, he swung his mace in salute. Thuras pressed a trembling hand to the carved face of a first-man god embedded in the wall. Stoneheart entered last. She paused at the threshold, head tilted. Arya wondered if the ancient runes whispered to her, calling the river-born corpse to remember the northbound song of roots and blood. Whatever passed, Stoneheart marched inside, rainwater dripping from her graying curls. They held the east tower by dawn, slaying 10 Boltons and 4 Sellswords for loss of 1 brother, Willem Cumble, arrow in groin gushing bright. Thuras burned his body beside ancient wolf runes, praying a god he scarce believed in might know this man. Smoke rose thick. Ravenglass arrowheads glittered among embers. Next came the hard part, taking the middle tower which commanded the old gatehouse. Cranach scouts reported 50 men under Ser Damon Locke, a ruthless Southron knight paid in Dreadfort coin. Arya studied the distance. 100 paces across open yard churned to knee-deep mud. Banners drooped listless on rotted ropes. She recalled stories of Asha Greyjoy's failed assault, of green-seared bodies sunk to the waist in stew of tar and rot. Stoneheart sat silent upon a toppled lintel, eyes fixed on nothing. Arya approached. For a moment mother and daughter faced one another beneath a sky heavy with crows. "How?" Arya asked. Stoneheart lifted a tattered sleeve. Within her palm nested a small clay vial stoppered with wax. She pressed it into Arya's hand. Arya unstoppered, sniffed. Wildfire, sharp as spite. Enough to torch tar, collapse ramparts, sow confusion. She nodded. At dusk they enacted the plan. Crannogmen crawled through moat silt, dragging barrels of swamp gas harvested from ferment pits where peat decayed. Arya and Rennick scaled a crumbling buttress to perch above the Bolton parapet. Below, sentries paced dull routines, boots squelching. When the moon crowned high, Mira Reed loosed a flaming reed dart across the courtyard. It rattled against a barrel seam, spark, hiss. More gas whooshed green, leaping like demon tongues. Bolton screamed, tearing at burning doublets. Arya dropped through smoke, dagger carving shapes from flame-lit air. She moved as the Faceless had trained her, blade silent, nerve cold. Bolton armor cooked inside breastplates. Icelets belched steam as men roasted. Lem crashed in swinging his mace, smashing skulls softened by heat. Thuras bellowed the warrior's name until his voice cracked. The yard became a cauldron of shrieking men and guttering green fire. Ser Damon Locke emerged wreathed in sparks, long sword glowing cherry. He charged Arya, swinging a brutal overhand meant to cleave skull. She sidestepped, rolled, slashed behind knee, hamstring parted. He roared, twisting. Her blade punched through his breastplate armpit, found heart. He sagged. She pressed cheek to his as he died and whispered, "For gray wind." When day broke, the middle tower flew a tattered direwolf banner scavenged from wagon stores. Ravens wheeled overhead, croaking approval. The westernmost tower, seeing black smoke and wolf flag, surrendered by midday. Its commander, a Northman once sworn to House Hornwood, bent the knee, pleading mercy. Mercy was Stoneheart's to grant or deny. Arya watched impassively as the man sobbed upon his sword. Stoneheart's judgment came swift. She had all Flayedman flags piled in the courtyard and doused with the last vial of wildfire. The green pyre lit sky and swamp alike. No Bolton sigil remained, yet victory birthed discord. Thuras argued they must hold Moat Cailin for the true king in the north, whoever that might be, lest southern armies pour through. Lem countered they were few, their purpose vengeance not kingdom. Mira Reed urged withdrawal. Crannogmen could harry any army passing the neck so long as swamp lay unbroken. Stoneheart listened, unmoving. At last she raised a slice of charcoal and scrawled upon the gatehouse stone 2 stark words, "Winterfell calls." Argument ended. The Brotherhood packed rations, braced wounds, and left a skeleton CRE. W of reeds to collapse the moat causeways behind them. By twilight they stood on the King's Road's northern stem, snowflakes spiraling small and timid, the season's first scouts. Arya lifted her hood, feeling the flakes kiss her lashes, melt, run cold down her cheeks. She tasted winter and memory twined. Wolf howls across frozen ponds, Bran's laughter chasing snow devils, John limping from practice yard with sword bruises. Each recollection stabbed deeper than Bolton steel. Yet she did not flinch. Pain was proof she had not yet surrendered every shard of self. That night the column camped beneath ancient sentinel trees, whose naked branches etched constellations upon a violet sky. Arya sat apart, stropping her dagger by starlight. Footsteps crunched behind. She turned. Gendry loomed, arms folded. "Angui says we march at dawn," he began, voice low. "Says winter snows'll blanket tracks if we make speed." Arya grunted assent. Gendry rubbed a thumb along the horn haft of his hammer. "You never speak to me," he swallowed. "I know I'm thick as old milk, but I worry. About you. I'm fine." "No, you're not. Thuras says dead fire burns inside you. Says every kill feeds it. I seen how you look after, cold like the steel you wield. That ain't the Arya I knew." She met his eyes, saw honest fear there, and something softer. Once she had felt that softness, too. "The Arya you knew died," she said. "Why cling to ashes?" "Because the world's cold enough," he muttered. "Because I need to remember there's still heat somewhere." She opened her mouth, closed it. A tremor rippled through her ribcage, quick as a heartbeat behind bars. For an instant faces flashed. Nymeria bounding through pine needles, Syrio Farrell chanting Water Dancer's creed, Sansa threading needles before a roaring hearth. Then Stoneheart's rasp cut across memory. Names. The tremor stilled. "Sleep," Arya said, turning back to her whetstone. "Tomorrow's ride is long." Gendry lingered, shoulders slumping, then trudged away. She watched him go, shadows swallowing broad shoulders until only the hammer silhouette remained, like a child's toy abandoned in frost. When silence returned, Arya set dagger aside, drew her knees to chest, and stared at the smudge of northern lights wavering on horizon's edge. Somewhere beyond, Winterfell awaited. Flayed banners to be torn, a bastard to be bled, a home reclaimed. Yet what home did a dead girl need? She pressed forefinger to the faint scar above her spine where Aenys's knife had entered. The flesh there felt numb, as though not truly hers. She closed her eyes against the cold tears of night, letting darkness flood in. In that darkness, her mother's specter emerged. Lady Catelyn not as Stoneheart, but in living memory. Warm smile, soft voice, arms smelling of rose oil. The specter did not speak. It only looked upon Arya with sorrow diluted by endless understanding. Arya's throat tightened. "I'm sorry," she whispered into her knees. Words too small for the vast silence. Whether she apologized to Mother, to Gendry, to herself, she could not say. No answer came, only the sigh of wind threading dead branches, the hush of snow beginning to fall in earnest, the steady breathing of sleeping men and the slower, colder breaths of those between life and death. She tilted her face upward. Snowflakes landed upon lashes, lingered one heartbeat, then melted into tears she would not allow. Morning arrived brittle as frozen glass. They rode north, days blurred into a dazzle of white and gray. Snow deepened from ankle crust to calf wallow, until horses labored, nostrils icing over. One dawn they found a Bolton outrider nailed to an oak, flayed but alive, tongue removed. In his chest someone, wildlings perhaps, had carved, "Pay in skin." Stoneheart watched without reaction as the man gargled blood. Thuras offered mercy. She shook her head. They left him for the crows. More such sights awaited. Charred farmsteads, children frozen with arms clutched round bellies, trails of sooty prints leading nowhere. Winter was come early, driving small folk before it like leaves in gale, and Ramsay Bolton's hunters took sport from those stragglers. Tales reached the brotherhood of pink-skinned corpses left along the barrows, of a giant flayed and set ablaze to light a feast. Arya drank each story like sour ale, letting it curdle in her gut into something stronger than hate. Resolve. 2 leagues south of Winterfell, they caught their first glimpse of the castle's new order. Bolton banners, flayed man bleeding on pink, snapped from crenels. Smoke rose from forges where re-armed footly men hammered pikes. Patrols rode thick along the King's Road, mastiffs snarling at leashes. A light snow fell, soon whipped into needle spray by wind howling off the moors. The air stank of dogs and wet ash. Mira scouted their perimeter and returned with dire tidings. Ramsay had summoned Karstark remnants, 300 spears. Worse, whispers said Lannister Gold Finance Sellswords led by Sir Harry Strickland of the Golden Company, newly landed at White Harbor. The numbers dwarfed the Brotherhood's Ragged 60 and the Reed skirmishers. Arya listened, then drew her blade across her palm, letting black steel slice skin. The cut bled sluggishly. Cold slowed the flow. She smeared the blood on snow, shaping letters, "Fear." She lifted the dagger, tapped its pommel. "We kill their fear. Fear is Ramsay's armor. Strip it away and he is only bastard flesh." Lem chuckled dark. "Strip flesh, aye, then flay the flayer." Stoneheart reached, clasped Arya's cut hand. The blood smeared their joined palms. Mother and daughter bound by iron scent. Stoneheart turned to Thuras, rasped 2 words, "Barrow blaze." Thuras frowned. "You would burn the Bolton supply wagons? Risk drawing them out?" Stoneheart nodded once. Thus was the plan wrought. Under new moon dark, they crept across the barrowfields where Bolton quartermasters kept wagons laden with winter stores. Dried oats, salt beef, lamp oil. Crannogmen tunneled beneath snowdrifts, planting pots of bog wildfire scavenged from buried peat pockets, each sealed with wax and pitch. Arya led a small strike team, Angui, Mira, Lem, slipping past sleeping mastiffs drugged with harebell seeds. She slit throats of 4 sentries before they stirred. Lem and Angui daubed pitch across wagon wheels. Mira laced bundles of arrows in oil. When all lay ready, Thuras raised his swordstaff high. The Red Priest whispered a prayer to gods old and new. The blade burst into orange bloom that licked snowflakes to steam. He hurled it into the nearest wagon. Flame crawled, hissed. Balls of green wildfire popped as lids melted. Sudden silence fractured into chaos. Dogs baying, horns braying, men stumbling half-armed from tents as green columns jumped heavenward, painting snow emerald. Arya seized the moment. She darted beneath a panicked horse, hamstringing 2 guards in swift arcs. Boltons reeled, blinded by dancing light. The Brotherhood fell upon them, cutting throats, smashing kneecaps. When a horn's shriek rose from the rampart, Thuras blew his own reply, a guttural roar that echoed up Winterfell's cold stones like the cry of mythic direwolves. Ramsay took the bait. Within the hour, a sortie thundered through the gate. 50 cavalry, Ramsay at their head, bastard cloak sewn of direwolf pelts flapping behind him. Snow churned under iron hooves. He led them toward the barrowfields where green flames still whipped sky. Halfway across the white expanse, horses balked. Pits yawned beneath thin ice crust, traps crannogmen had gouged, stakes awaiting. The lead charger plunged, snapping forelegs with a sickening crack. Riders spilled. Chaos erupted. Bolton archers loosed. Arrows hissed but found only mist. From the barrow mounds the Brotherhood rose, bows drawn, releasing a volley that fell like midnight rain. Ramsay's men reeled under the hail. Ramsay himself wheeled round, spurring back toward Winterfell. Arya, crouched in the snow behind a cairn, watched through narrowed eyes, the bastard's silhouette stark against leaping green flames. She ran. Snow muffled her footfalls. Every breath seared lungs but ice-numbed pain. Ramsay galloped, hoarse froth spraying. Arya cut across his path, vaulting a low tombstone, landing within arm's reach. She thrust upward. The Valyrian blade ripped saddle leather, grazing his thigh. He shrieked, slashing down with a curved dagger. Her parry jolted arm bones. He spurred hard, trampling air where she'd stood, and fled toward the gatehouse. Arrows stitched his cloak, severing wolf tails. Horse stumbled at the drawbridge lip. Ramsay spilled onto planks slick with snow slush. Arya closed fast, heart hammering. Men atop battlements shouted. Chains rattled as portcullis groaned. Ramsay scrambled, wild eyes rolling, blood seeping from thigh slash. Arya leapt. He whipped dagger in panicked arcs. She caught his wrist, slammed blade aside, drove her forehead into his nose. Cartilage burst. He howled, clutching face. She kneed his gut, bore him onto his back amid churned snow. Her dagger found throat hollow. She pressed enough pressure that skin dimpled, but did not pierce. "Name them," she hissed, breath pluming white. "The children you burned, the women you flayed. Name them, bastard." Blood bubbles foamed his lips. Who? Name them. Ramsay spat scarlet. "Trash," he gurgled. "Peasant scum. Filth. They had no names." Arya's hand trembled. In that trembling she felt every life he dismissed, every corpse along winter roads, every wolf hide sewn into his cloak. Yet some flicker of her father's voice, the old Ned honor-bound, echoed. The man who passes the sentence should swing the sword. Swing, but not with rage. Swing for justice. "I give you a name," she whispered, voice steady. "Monster." She slid the dagger across his throat. Blood gushed, bright on snow. Ramsay clawed at his own neck, eyes bulging, breath whistling through widening gape. He spasmed once, twice, then lay still. Snowflakes settled on his lashes like funeral confetti. Arrows thudded into the drawbridge around her. She turned, saw Bolton archers re-knocking indecision. They feared hitting their lord's corpse. A hoarse shout broke their aim. Stoneheart emerged from swirling green smoke, mounted on a pale horse, her voice rasping a war cry older than kingdoms. Brotherhood ranks surged, pushing toward the gate with axes and picks, battering the half-raised portcullis. Cogs shrieked, chains snapped, iron teeth ground upward inch by inch. Arya wiped her blade on Ramsay's cloak, rose, and walked through the widening maw into the castle of her childhood. Winterfell, home of memory and ghosts, greeted her with the stench of dog kennels and burnt pork. Yet beneath the rot lay ancient stone that remembered every Stark footfall, every wolf carved in weirwood grain. Snow trembled upon ramparts as if holding its breath. She halted in the godswood. The weirwood tree towered, red leaves drifting like bloody tears. Once she had hidden behind that trunk, giggling, while Robb searched with roasted chestnuts. Once her father prayed here, voice a hum lost among rustling leaves. Now the face in the bark seemed changed. Eyes deeper, mouth cracked wider, as though mourning all that transpired. Arya knelt in silence. Behind her, Stoneheart's footfalls ceased at clearing's edge. Mother and daughter faced the heart tree, each bound to it by blood and sorrow. Snow swirled, thickening. Somewhere beyond the walls, horns sounded retreat. Bolton men fled or bent knee. Yet in the godswood time froze. Arya touched the tree's crimson leaf, fingers staining red. She closed her eyes and whispered the names she had written across her heart. Robb, Mother, Grey Wind, Talisa, Old Nan, Yoren, Syrio, Lami. She kept adding until words blurred with tears she could no longer restrain. When her sobs quieted, she felt Stoneheart's hand on her shoulder, cold, yet gentle. She opened her eyes, looked up. The corpse queen's face twitched, stitches straining. And for one heartbeat Arya saw not Lady Stoneheart but Catelyn Stark, alive, love brimming. Lips shaped silent words, "My child." Then the moment shattered. Stoneheart's gaze hardened, head turning toward distant west where Lannister lions yet prowled. Vengeance had further roads to walk. Arya stood, wiping tears with bloodied knuckles. She breathed the scent of pine and snow, felt the heart tree's rough bark beneath fingertips as though holding Winterfell's pulse. One road ended here, another stretched into dusk. She would walk it, blade in hand, wolf at heel, mother's fire in veins, until every debt was settled or until what remained of her soul burned away to ash. But for this single heartbeat, beneath red leaves and falling snow, Arya Stark allowed herself to remember she was still alive. Wind howled through broken battlements, rattling shards of ice that clung to Winterfell's outer wall like 1,000 crystal teeth. In the hard blue dawn after Ramsay's death, the courtyard rang with axes and shovels as Brotherhood men toppled flayed-man banners into bonfires built of kennel timbers, and splintered pikes. Black smoke curled above the castle's cracked towers, mingling with the steam of melting snow. It smelled of dog fat and old sin. Ravens wheeled overhead, croaking harsh benedictions that echoed off the stones. By midday, only tatters remained of the bastard's rule. Pink silk singed to curling slag, iron nails popping free with each loud crack of burning wood. Arya worked alongside the others, sleeves rolled, palms blistered raw. She fed banner poles into the flames one after another, listening to each hiss and snap. When the last length of pink fabric blackened and collapsed, a silence settled on the courtyard, as if the castle itself exhaled for the first time in years. She glanced across the soot-dusted expanse to where Lady Stoneheart stood beneath the remains of the first keep. Snowflakes caught in her mother's hair like pale moths. Stoneheart's empty eyes fixed on the pyre until sparks died into gray embers. Then she turned away without a word and drifted into shadow, cloak trailing like funeral veil. That night, Arya sat atop the battlements above the Godswood, staring north toward the jagged horizon. Clouds gathered, bruised purple under starlight, pregnant with another storm. Somewhere beyond those clouds lay the wall, broken now, rumors said, by ice dragons and the dead. She wondered, not for the first time, if Bran still breathed beyond that ruin, if Jon yet walked among wildlings and ghosts. Each thought stabbed worse than the last, so she shut her eyes and listened instead to Winterfell's new heartbeat. Hammers knocking loose old nails, sledges pounding timbers straight, men singing low to keep frost from their throats. The castle was alive again, though half its stones still bore mute witness to fire and flame. Footsteps scraped behind her. Gendry emerged from a narrow tower door, hair wild, breath a white plume. He carried 2 wooden cups steaming with honeyed mead. Without speaking, he offered one. Arya accepted, though the warmth scalded cracks in her palms. They leaned side by side, backs to the crenel, drinking in companionable quiet. "Snow's thickening," Gendry muttered after a stretch. "Roads'll choke come fortnight." Arya nodded. "Then we ride before the choke." Her voice sounded like the scrape of steel on stone. "Mother wants the West." "The West," he echoed, mouth twisting. "Casterly rocks 300 leagues. Lannisters still hold the Golden Tooth, and Riverrun's lost. You'd march 60 souls through storm and lion lines." "Through," she said simply. "Or under." Gendry didn't reply. He drained his cup, set it on the crenel, and folded arms thick with Smith's muscle. Snowflakes settled on the corded scar at his neck where a wildling axe had once kissed skin. He shivered and stepped closer to her, as though her slight frame might shield him from wind. The gesture was clumsy, earnest, painfully human. Arya felt heat crawl up her throat, foreign and unwelcome. She set her cup down and turned to leave. "Arya," he blurted. She halted. "When this a vengeance? When it's done, what then? Will the girl I knew ever come back?" Moonlight painted his face, and for an instant she saw the boy who'd carried her on his shoulders in Harrenhal's forge yard, laughing despite iron chains. She felt the tug of that memory like a fishhook lodged deep, but other images crowded in. Aenys's dagger slipping between her ribs, Ramsay's blood steaming on snow, her mother's corpse venting river water through slashed throat. The hook tore free. "There is no girl," she said, voice low. "Only the knife and the names." Gendry's shoulders sagged. Snow caught in his lashes. He drew breath to speak again, then thought better and stepped back into the tower's dark. Arya waited until the door clanged shut before letting her own breath go. It plumed skyward, a wraith. Below, in the great hall, a council gathered around makeshift tables. Torches guttered in iron sconces, casting long shadows across wolf-carved columns. Lem, Thuras, Mira Reed, and half a dozen Crannoc chiefs argued over maps weighted by daggers. The ink-black dagger of Valyrian steel Arya kept sheathed at her hip anchored the corner nearest her seat. Stoneheart presided at the table's head, silent save for the occasional hiss that clawed free of her stitched throat. Thuras jabbed a vine-charred finger at a red X over Riverrun. "We need allies," he insisted, voice hoarse from smoke. "Blackfish holds 1 tower with 50 men at most. Free folk south of the Trident fear winter more than lions. But if we free Riverrun—" "Too long," Lem interrupted, slamming a fist the size of a ham. "A siege drags months. Golden companies on the march. Lannister coffers bought 10,000 Sellswords and half the grain of the Reach. If they crush the Blackfish, nothing stands between them and Winterfell. The dead stand, Mira said quietly from her stool. All eyes turned. Whispers out of Eastwatch, whites massed by the thousands. And Lord Commander Snow is gone. Dead, some say, or fled beyond ice. A hush settled. Even the torch flames seemed to cower. Arya stared at the oaken tabletop scarred with knife marks. The grain reminded her of old Maester Luwin's wrinkles. She traced a knot with ragged nail. "We face two storms," she said at last. "The dead and the lions. Which devours us first matters little if we face them apart. We must wield them against each other." Thuras cocked his head. "Explain." Arya glanced at Stoneheart, who gave the faintest nod. Approval, or perhaps merely permission to speak. "The Golden Company marches to Winterfell not for conquest alone. They chase something, someone. They hunt for the Prince of Dragonstone." Lem scowled. "Targaryen whelp? Rumors. Rumors Lannister gold treats as truth," Arya countered. "If we lead them to believe the prince hides here, they'll press hard, outrun their supply lines. We draw them into the snowbound north, where lions starve and Sellswords freeze. And when the dead sweep south, lion meets corpse," Thuras finished, rubbing beard. "Interesting. Yet to bait them we must first hold Winterfell." "And broadcast the lie," Mira added.
Ravens intercepted, desertes captured, tales planted.
Stoneheart leaned forward. The torchlight lit her torn throat, stitches gleaming black. She scratched a single word into the table with dagger tip. "Yes." Thus the ploy took shape. Over the next night, Brotherhood riders slip. Ped through blizzards posing as frightened crofters and broken men. They spread whispers at every hearth. A silver-haired boy, last scion of the dragon, sheltered by the Stark outlaws in Winterfell's crypts. They claimed he bore a sword of burning steel, a sign of prophecy. They told of dire wolves guarding him, of crannic sorcerers weaving frog-skin glamours over the castle. Each tale louder, wilder. Meanwhile, Arya drilled recruits in the yard. The freed small folk of the Bar Rolands, goaded by Bolton cruelty, flocked to Winterfell with pitchforks and cudgels. Smithies rang night and day. Under Gendry's hammer, rusted breastplates were refitted, scythes straightened into halberds, and cart chains forged into spiked flails. Mira taught her marsh scouts the secrets of peat bombs, glass orbs filled with foul swamp gas that ignited green. Thuras blessed barrels of wildfire, though scars on his hands told how thin that blessing ran. As the snow deepened, Winterfell transformed into a warren of trenches, murder holes, and deadfalls. Every outer tower bristled with quarrels. Yet Arya refused to let the castle become her cage. Each dawn she led patrols across frozen fields, mapping drifts, marking ice thickness with spear shafts. Some mornings she found villagers frost-stiff in hollows, cheeks gnawed by wolves. She burned them where they lay, unwilling to leave corpses for the Night King's armies. Other mornings she found stranger things. Statues of ice shaped like kneeling men, eyes hollow, posed as if in prayer to distant stars. Those statues she shattered with a single swing of Umber's maul, buried shards in bonfires scoured with salt. The Golden Company reached Moat Cailin on the 18th day of the Wolf Moon. Its ramparts still smoldered from the Brotherhood's sabotage. Engineering wagons bogged in thawing pits. Sellswords cursed the mire, lost horses to unseen sinkholes. By the time they dragged siege towers clear, tempers snapped colder than ice. Scouts reported that their commander, Ser Harry Strickland, wept from chill, complaining he'd been lured into the arse end of death. But gold ensures obedience, and the lions behind that gold would not spare his head for failure. Snow fell thicker as they marched north. Axes rang against frozen trees, felling timber for fires that guttered to embers before bread warmed. Deserters slipped away nightly. Some were caught by Crannig outriders, stripped naked, tarred, then sent stumbling back south as living scarecrows shrieking of demon wolves. Others disappeared altogether, swallowed by blizzard or worse. On the fourth night after Moat Cailin, Arya led a small band into the enemy's flank. The storm made ghosts of them, white cloaks, white hoods, stalking beneath swirling veils. They crept into a sleeping camp, throats muffled by frost-stiff scarves. Arya slit the throat of the guard dog first, fingers closing its muzzle till the twitching stopped. Then she drifted through tents, dagger kissing warm skin. Flames gusted when Mira tossed a peat bomb into the wagon laden with grain. Green fire whooshed skyward, painting snow a sickly emerald. Screams tore through canvas. Horses panicked, trampling men beneath iron-shod hooves. Amid chaos, Arya found Strickland's banner. Yellow skull impaled upon spear and hacked it free. She stuffed it in her satchel, proof of strike. They slipped out as easily as they'd entered, leaving a smoking scar and a column of raven silhouettes rising. The cell's words would still march, but leaner, angrier. Perfect. 3 days later, Thuris's raven lookout spotted the dead. A line like black ink across the white, stretching east to west beyond sight. No horns announced their coming, only the crackle of distant ice and a shrill wind that smelled of graves. That night, Arya climbed the broken tower and watched their lanternless tide creep south mile by mile. Under pale green auroras, the dead glittered, frost armor blazing like crystal. Giants strode among them, white shapes draped in ragged furs, eyes blazing cold flame. At dawn, Golden Company outriders collided with the vanguard of death in a shallow valley called Maiden's Hollow. The cell's words had no time to form ranks. White spearmen surged through drifting snow, impaling horses, dragging riders screaming beneath iron boots. Some men broke, fleeing north, straight toward Winterfell. Others turned south, abandoning baggage to lighten mounts. Strickland bellowed for discipline, but his voice vanished under the wail of winter. By dusk, word of the disaster reached Winterfell. Arya stood beside Stoneheart on the battlements as a pair of half-frozen scouts dismounted, limbs shaking. They recounted eyes blazing blue, dead things that did not bleed, swords that shattered steel with frigid strikes. They begged for sanctuary. Stoneheart listened, unmoved. When they finished, she raised her hand and carved a new message into the frost atop the parapet. Lure them. Arya understood. If Strickland's survivors reached Winterfell, they'd bring panic into Ramsay's old kennels, and corpses if they'd lost wounded along the way. Instead, the castle gates remained barred. Fires blazed bright atop the walls to lure both lion and corpse. Every arrow notch bristled. Any cell's word who attempted to scale was answered by quarrel or pitch. Panic rode those men, pushed them north-northeast across barren tundra where the dead pursued. Winterfell watched from its walls like a silent wolf, eyes gleaming. Late that night, as the Golden Company reeled blindly toward the shivering forest, Mira's Crannig scouts returned with an uncanny gift, a prisoner. They dragged him bound in nets of woven reeds soaked in bog tar. He was an other, tall, skin white as moonlit milk glass, eyes burning star blue. It thrashed soundlessly, blade of ice fused to palm. For Crannig men had died wrestling it, frostbitten limbs shattered like brittle twigs. Thuras hefted his flaming sword staff, but Stoneheart stayed him with a gesture. She motioned for Arya. Together they descended into the ice cellar beneath the kitchens, where pigs once hung from hooks. Now the hooks held the other, chains of ironweed, mined and forged in long-dead furnaces of the north, bit into its wrists. The creature's breath feathered frost across stone. Its glare pierced gloom, threat and promise entwined. Arya approached. She felt the cold of the thing seep into her marrow, dulling the faint warmth left in veins. Still she stepped closer until icy vapor licked her cheeks. In her hand she carried Catspaw, the Valyrian dagger of black steel. She flashed memory. When Sam Tarly slew a walker with dragonglass, how Valyrian steel was kin to that black volcanic glass. She had a weapon, but Stoneheart wanted more than a kill. Torches encircled the pair. The other's lips did not move, yet Arya heard a whisper inside her skull, like wind seeping through broken shutters. You are dead flesh walking. Our queen waits. Come north. Kneel. Serve. She gripped hilt tighter. Your queen's name. Silence, then dawn. and dusk, cryptic but truth enough. Arya glanced at Stoneheart. Her mother's withered features remained stone. She drew a pouch of powdered weirwood ash, sprinkled it over the creature's chest. The ash hissed, smoke curling. Thuras stepped forward, blade flickering. At Stoneheart's nod, he plunged the flaming steel through the other's heart. Frost met fire, an explosion of steam that bellowed off cellar walls. The creature screamed without voice, body fracturing like shattered quartz. It collapsed into shards that sizzled and bled pale smoke. When the air cleared, Stoneheart knelt among the shards and gathered one splinter of blue crystal. She pressed it into Arya's palm. It burned cold as empty sky. This was her new blade, sharper than steel, deadlier than frost. The sigil of the enemy now turned to edge for vengeance. They forged arrowheads from that crystal, set them atop ash shafts. Crannig Fletchers bound them with sinew soaked in wildfire broth. Angui tested one on a frozen boar carcass. The crystal shaft sliced clean, flesh flash freezing along the wound. They prepared 24 such arrows. One they saved for Arya alone. Winter's Maw, the name men gave to the storm, descended 2 mornings later, propelled by wings of winds stronger than any since the long night. Snow roared sideways, choking light. Wolves slunk into kennels, tails tucked. Fires retreated to stone hearths. Yet atop the battlements, Arya stood with bow strung, quiver rattling in white fury. Stoneheart stood beside her, visage flecked with rime. Lem, Thuras, Mira, and 100 others lined the walls, faces pale but eyes bright. From the veil of swirling white emerged shapes, first faint as memories, then stark. The dead marched, a river frozen mid-torrent, cresting over itself in waves of bone. Giants in shattered mail swung tree trunks like flails. Whites scampered beneath, all teeth and nails. And above them, gliding on tendrils of mist, came a figure tall and terrible. Not the Night King of legend, but a queen draped in tattered weirwood leaves, hair streaming white as hoarfrost. In her grasp she wielded a scepter of living ice alive with ghost light. Her eyes found Arya atop the wall and held. Arya's pulse hammered. She knocked a crystal arrow, pulling feather to ear. Snow stung her eyes. She exhaled long, steady, letting the world narrow to queen and bow. The queen raised her scepter. A sheet of frost rolled outward, running up the wall like an invisible tide, stones cracking from sudden chill. Torches sputtered out. Screams erupted below. Loose! Lem roared. Shafts hissed. Some splintered against unseen walls of ice. Others stuck in white ribs, but the dead did not bleed. Arya's arrow flew truest, straight toward the queen's breast. At the last instant, the queen slashed her scepter, shattering the shaft into glittering shards. A shockwave of cold hammered the wall, flinging men backward. Arya slammed against Krenel, wind knocked out. Her bow fell, snapped. She scrambled for another arrow, none remained. Below, Stoneheart clutched the wall with clawed hands, stitches ripping anew as her lips peeled back in silent snarl. The dead surged, bodies piling at the moat where boiling oil hissed and wildfire roared. Giants threw whites into flame as living bridges. Corpses clawed, clawed, clawed. Winterfell shook. Arya raced along parapet, heart pounding, searching for a shot, a gap, anything. In the yard below, Gendry rallied smiths with hammers turned war clubs, smashing any corpse that reached the inner steps. Mira's frog bombs burst green among white clusters, momentarily slowing the tide. Lem swung his mace in circles, caving skulls with each arc. Thuras staggered, sword staff guttering, lips moving in frantic prayer. Above it all, the queen hovered beyond bowshot, directing her army with languid sweeps of scepter. Every sweep sent arcs of frost lancing across the sky, freezing arrow volleys mid-flight. Arya ground her teeth. She needed closer range. She sprinted down spiral stairs 2 at a time, boots skidding on ice. In the armory, she seized a bundle of rope and a grappling hook, slung twin knives across back. She burst onto the outer wall's lower walkway and scanned. The east bastion jutted closest to the queen's path. Her breath crystallized. She raced. Ice cracked beneath heel. Mortar exhaled dust. She reached the bastion as a giant slammed the wall below, stones buckling. She tied rope to Merlin, hurled hook into blizzard. It caught on shattered crow's nest timber leaning exposed beyond parapet. Without pause, she swung out over the courtyard, rappelling into screaming wind. Dead hands reached from below. She kicked one skull loose, felt teeth snap at her boot sole. She swung, twisted, landed atop a half-collapsed turret closer to the Queen's line. Height swayed sickening. Snow blinded. She drew one of the last crystal knives. The Queen's silhouette glimmered through white swirl 30 paces away, still aloft. Arya breathed, letting world slow. 1 heartbeat. 2. She hurled. The knife spun end over end, a tiny dart of night against pale storm. At the final moment, the Queen turned, whether by chance or some deeper sense, and the blade passed under her raised arm, shaving a lock of frost hair. It vanished into snow behind. The Queen's gaze locked on Arya. A smile, thin and sad, touched her colorless lips. She lifted a hand. The air around Arya crystallized. Frost spider-webbed across her lungs, breath freezing inside. She gasped, vision dimming, limbs turning to lead. Somewhere far away she heard Gendry shout her name. Then thunder cracked. A burning javelin of fire arced upward from the yard, hurled by Thuras with both hands. It struck the Queen's scepter, exploding in sparks orange and blue. The spell broke. Arya sucked air that tasted of blood and ice. She tore her second knife free and leapt. She flew from the turret, body arrow straight. Midair, time slowed to a sigh. She remembered Sirio. Swift as the wind, silent as the shadow, quick as a cat. She remembered Jon ruffling her hair. She remembered her father's voice on a snowy morning. The lone wolf dies, but the pack survives. She struck the Queen full in the chest. The impact shattered bone like brittle glass. They tumbled through air together, Queen twisting, Arya clinging with legs locked around brittle waist. She plunged the crystal dagger beneath the creature's sternum. Frost exploded, slicing skin, but she drove deeper until hilt hit ribs. Blue fire poured from the wound, scorching her hands with cold. The Queen screamed without sound, body convulsing. Arya wrenched dagger high as though opening curtains. Light burst, pure, blinding azure. An echo rolled through storm like the crack of worlds splitting. The Queen's body fractured along veins of light, shards spinning outward. Arya felt herself thrown, tumbling amid brilliance. She crashed into snowbank inside the yard, breath crushed. Shards of ice fell around her, tinkling like bells. The storm stilled to a hush, flakes drifting lazy. Across the field, the dead froze in mid-stride, blue eyes flickering, then winked out. Corpses toppled as marionettes whose strings were cut. Giants crashed with earth-shaking thuds. Silence spread, broken only by the wail of wind between towers. Men stared, unable to speak. Mira dropped her spear, knees buckling. Thuras sank to haunches, sword extinguishing. Lem wept openly, steam rising from eyes. Arya lay staring up at swirling gray sky, lungs burning, fingers numb around dagger haft. A shadow loomed, Lady Stoneheart. She knelt, runnels of dark river water trailing from hair that had thawed beneath storm of magic. In her eyes smoldered something new, not the icy ember of vengeance, but the faintest echo of warmth. She reached, cupped Arya's cheek. Her thumb brushed away a single tear, Arya's or melting snow, none could know. Then Stoneheart's lips moved. No rasp, no hiss, a whisper dry as autumn leaves. My proud girl. The stitches at her throat tore open, bloodless river water flowing. She sagged. Arya scrambled upright, catching her mother as legs gave way. Stoneheart's body felt lighter than bone, as though half made of mist. She tried to speak again. No sound came, only her gaze remained, softening as the storm light dimmed inside. A crack sounded, subtle as twigs underfoot. Stoneheart's skin fissured where ice had spread unseen, spiderwebbing across cheeks, brow, neck. Each fissure glowed faint blue, then faded. With a long sigh, almost relief, Lady Stoneheart crumbled, flesh dissolving to fine snow that swirled on dawning breeze. Within Arya's arms, nothing remained but cloak and memory. The dawn that followed bloomed gold and rose, casting long slopes of light across blood-soaked snow. Brotherhood and crannogmen moved among silent corpses of wights, smashing skulls to be sure. Ravens feasted, unconcerned. Wolves emerged from kennels, shaggy dogs' progeny, and sniffed the fallen, hackles raised, then loped into forest-chasing scents of spring. Inside the great hall, Thuras poured mulled wine for living and dead alike, tipping cups upon the floor for lost brothers. Lem spoke prayers to gods neither old nor new. Mira lit a pyre for Crannog dead, green flames dancing with gold. Gendry found Arya seated before the heart tree, cloak wrapped round shoulders. She watched morning sun filter through red leaves, face blank. He knelt, taking her rigid hands. "It's over," he murmured. She shook her head once. No, her voice cracked, raw. "Winter's not done. Lions still prowl, and the realm must learn the dead can be slain." Gendry tried a smile. "Then we'll forge swords for every farmer south to Dorne." Her eyes finally met his, dark and depthless. "We, Gendry, I can't do this alone. I tried. The price?" She trailed off, vision drifting to where her mother's cloak lay folded at roots. She reached, picked it up, and draped it around shoulders like royal mantle. "I am Arya Stark of Winterfell," she said, standing beneath bleeding tree. "Not no one, not Lady of Death. My mother's war ends here." She lifted the Valyrian dagger, Edge of Winterfolk some would name it, and pressed its flat to her chest. "But the North must live to meet spring. Will you help me build that spring?" Gendry rose, placing callous palm over hers atop dagger hilt. "Hammer and heart," he vowed. "I stand with you." Footsteps crunched snow. Thuras approached, hair singed, eyes bright as dawn's first torch. "Sister," he said, bowing. "Word spreads already. The wolf girl slew the Winter Queen. Northmen rally. Blackfish rides with river lords. Stannis' ragged banners march from Eastwatch, bearing tales of white fire in night sky. They come to pledge swords." Arya's shoulders straightened. She felt the weight of cloak, not chain of vengeance, but fabric woven of duty, love, and loss. "Then we'll greet them with hot soup and sharper steel," she said. "Send ravens. The North remembers, and now the North unites." As Thuras hurried off, Lem's booming laugh carried over ramparts, scolding a green boy for dulling axe edge. Smith hammers chimed again in forges restored. Children peered from broken windows, eyes alight not with fear but wondering hope. The castle breathed, stone lungs filling with thawing air. Arya looked to horizon where sun climbed, gilding fresh snow to molten gold. For the first time in years, she let herself imagine a world beyond names and blades. Orchards blooming pink, Nymeria running fields beside laughing pups, halls echoing with music, not screams. The road there would be long, blood-slick still, yet each journey begins with one step. She sheathed her dagger, drew Gendry's hand, and together they descended from the Godswood into newborn light. Winterfell stirred around them, wolves and men rebuilding, fires roaring against lingering cold. Above the gate, the direwolf banner snapped proud, edges charred but center bright. And far away, across rivers and mountains, lions trembled at rumors of a girl with a knife of night and a heart forged in ice and fire, marching south with winter's last breath behind her and spring's first seed within. Arya Stark walked on, no longer alone, no longer dead, yet never forgetting. The past shadows trailed at her heels, but ahead lay roads uncharted, where stories end and others begin. In her pocket, she carried one final shard of eerie blue crystal. Someday she would bury it beneath a weirwood sapling and whisper to the old gods, "Let the dead rest." Until that day, she would carve a path for the living with steel honed sharp and a name she would never again relinquish. Sen. Owl peeled from Winterfell's chimneys in thin gray ribbons, chased skyward by hearth fires that never slept. A week bled into a second, then a third, and still the fortress rang with tools and voices, the cadence of living folk reclaiming stone from memory. The battle for the north became a tale retold at every cookfire, how a girl leapt into storm-black air and split the Winter Queen like frozen glass, how the dead fell silent the instant her body shattered, how dawn itself seemed reborn in that blue explosion. Yet for Arya Stark there was no lull, only the steady hum of tasks unending. To pause invited ghosts, and ghosts, once admitted, were greedy guests. She rose before first light, when the sky was bruised violet and the snowpack still hissed in its sleep. With Gendry and a knot of the hardiest smiths, she patrolled the inner curtain, testing newly forged hinges, rubbing pine tar into oak braces to keep frost from splitting them. They checked the kennels, now emptied of Ramsay's hounds and home instead to half-feral direwolf mongrels who sensed her kinship and nosed her hands for reassurance. They paced the godswood where the heart tree's red leaves curled inward like slivers of dried blood, clearing deadfall and hammering iron staples into the old stone well so children would not tumble headlong into black. At midday, she drilled the new levee in the yard. Crofters from Widow's Watch, ragged free folk from the Gift, gaunt fisherwives whose husbands had frozen in their skiffs. She showed them the water dance footwork Sirio Farrell had once impressed upon her, stripped of flourish to suit thick boots and heavier blades. Gendry stood behind each line, correcting grips, murmuring patience while sparks from his mobile forge hissed upward. Sometimes Arya saw sparks catch in his beard. He would wipe without thinking, eyes never leaving hers. The gesture made her chest tighten in ways she did not have time to study. Evenings belonged to council. Lem, red-eyed and broader than the bare cloak over his shoulders, now commanded the hard fighters of the Brotherhood, though he repeated often that he served the wolf girl first, the red woman's ghost not at all. Thuras, burned on cheek and brow from his last inferno, presided by mapping candles sent across the long table. Juniper for rivermen, pine pitch for mountain clans, cedar for the Reach deserters who trickled northward believing the south unlivable in winter. Mira Reed, lean as hunger and twice as persistent, reported new miry paths dug through the neck, supply caches buried in oilskin, and secret cairns that pointed safe crossings. Behind them flickered the old direwolf banner, patched but proud. No flayed man would fly in Winterfell again. They spoke of threats, of 2,000 Golden Company remnants now camped at the Flint Cliffs, commanderless after Strickland vanished in the white, yet dangerous as cornered badgers. Of a Lannister host assembling at Pink Maiden, 3 banners for every surviving Stark spear, led by Ser Jaime himself, whose golden hand was rumored tipped now with steel claws. Of whispers that Queen Cersei had wed a Shadowbinder from Ass High, her courts rife with ink-eyed priests. And on every tongue crept the chill suggestion that the Night King himself might still stir in the shattered northern ice, seeking a vessel for resurrection. No one dared voice the worry that such a vessel could be of Stark blood. Arya listened, eyes hooded, until the hour grew long. First the wolf's den, she would say, each council night the same refrain. Then the lion's lair, and when dissent rose, when Thuras urged parley for grain, or Lem growled that one more charge south would break the last of them, she laid the Valyrian dagger on the map, tip resting over Casterly Rock, and silence gathered like frost. Yet orders alone could not quiet her heart. In the darkest slice of night, when torches guttered low and hammers stilled, Arya would slip from her chambers and roam. She walked parapets glazed in moon ice, where pitted stones recalled her mother's steps. She crossed empty battlements that once echoed with Robb's jokes at Theon's expense and Sansa's reluctant applause. She wound through servants' corridors still painted with soot of Bolton torches. It hurt to breathe in those passages, but the pain was a tether to everything she would not let Ramsay own. She carried no lantern. Moonlight was enough. One such night she found herself before the crypts. The spiral descent smelled of damp earth and grieving cedar. Torch cups waited unlit. She brushed a flint to wick until flames struggled alive. Stone kings loomed, shadows swallowing their wolf companions. She passed her grandfather Ricard, a lord reduced to chilly dignity, and knelt before her father's effigy. Ned's face was calm, the sculptor's hands too gentle to capture the flint of his gaze, but the curl of beard looked right. Needle lay across his stone knees where John had once placed it when they believed her drowned. Someone had set a sprig of winter rose upon the pommel. Arya picked it up, snow dust flaking between her fingers. "Father," she whispered, voice snuff-thin, "tell me which battles are worth the dead." The crypt swallowed the words. In the hush, she imagined his answer. "Every battle that protects the pack. No more, no less." Another sound intruded, the soft scuff of boot on dust. Arya slid to crouch, dagger ready. Gendry emerged from gloom, palms raised. "Couldn't sleep," he murmured. "Followed your trail." He smiled sheepish. "I beat iron all day, but quiet makes my thoughts louder." She straightened but did not sheath the blade. "What thoughts?" "That I'm no lord."
No Stark.
"Yet men look to me because I swing a hammer and because you trust me. I fear I'll disappoint them." "You forge their hope," she answered. "Steel you temper holds better than bloodline." He stooped to study Needle's silhouette. "Will you fight Jaime Lannister? They say he still carries Oathkeeper." "Oathkeeper broke the Frey siege at Riverrun," she said. "I owe that sword regard. But I will fight the man, not the metal." "And if he yields?" Arya thought of the Kingsguard knight who once stood at her father's side. Then of the boy king's champion who struck her friend Micah from a saddle. "Fate's debt, paid on either side," she said at last. "Alive or dead, his choice." Gendry reached to brush her knuckles. She flinched, then let the warmth remain. In crypt gloom, with stone wolves for witnesses, they stood breathing together until torch sputter dwindled to smoke. No vows were spoken. None were needed. When they finally parted, each carried the other's heartbeat like an ember cupped against winter. The first raven from Riverrun arrived 2 weeks later, parchment stained with blood rust but words clear. Edmure Tully had reclaimed his seat, Jaime Lannister taken hostage on the drawbridge in a daring river ambush. The Blackfish yet lived, aged but iron-willed, commanding a river levee swelling by the day. Ser Brienne of Tarth was rumored among them. Arya's spine thrummed at that name. Brienne, whose honor had once promised to keep Sansa safe. If Brienne lived, Sansa might. She bid Thura's ink reply, "Winterfell stands. Send the Maid of Tarth north with Sansa if found." Then she broke the council early, pounding through snow to the training yard where levies ran footwork drills. She seized a spear, sparred 3 men in swift rotation, her fury crisping the air. When they lay winded on packed drifts, she realized tears had frozen along her cheeks. She brushed them away with the back of a glove. That same sunset, scouts returned from the shivering forest with word that the Golden Company had gathered under the Bastard of Bitterbridge, a Sellsword captain named Edric Storm, rumored baseborn son of Robert Baratheon. He had marshaled survivors into a disciplined wedge of pike and cavalry and was moving east-northeast toward the King's Road, perhaps hoping to link with northern Karstark deserters still true to Crowkiller ideals. Worse, whispers placed a priest of R'hllor traveling in his wake, promising warmth and food to any who followed. Fire priests were one thing Arya had learned to distrust. Their gifts burned bright, but always demanded sacrifice. A council was called through the watch bells. Arya placed finger upon the map where the Flint water met the King's Road. "Here we strike," she declared. "They march for Winterfell's gate. We blind them first." Mira frowned. "Too near the weeping water. Torrents cut sheer banks." "Which will corner them," Arya answered. "Gendry's scorpions on the western bluff, Crannog darts from the aspens south. When they break, we drive them toward the river shallows we've seeded with ice stakes." Lem grunted approval. Thuras lifted a wineskin, muttering that war plans sounded like sermons when the girl spoke. Arya noticed but said nothing. She had grown used to weight settling upon her shoulders like fresh snow, heavy first, then simply there. Preparations unfurled at brutal pace. Gendry's forges spat teeth of blackened steel 6 feet long, tipped by barbs cruel as lion claws. Each scorpion took 3 horses to drag, but once positioned could punch a shaft through oak at 200 paces. Crannogmen harvested poison reed sap, smearing darts until the merest scratch could still a heart. Wildling trappers cut pine trunk into caltrops and froze them in river mud. The levy rehearsed shield walls, chanting old northern verses to time their steps. The sun sets red, the wolf's eyes gleam / we hold. We bite, we never scream. Before the march, Thuras insisted upon blessing every spear point with flame. Arya allowed it, though fire flashed unwelcome memories. Cat's throat laid open, red water swirling round corpse. That night she dreamed Lady Stoneheart again. But this time the dead woman stood in Winterfell's courtyard whole and living, auburn hair swept by spring breeze, eyes warm. She opened her arms yet said nothing. Arya walked forward but did not reach her before dawn split the dream. They struck at mid-morning in sleet so dense it stung bare cheeks like sand. The Golden Company traveled in neat columns, banners sagging wet. Edric rode ahead, bastard hammer strapped across back, cloak fur-lined but sodden. At first volley, scorpion bolts hissed from the bluffs, impaling lead horses. Lines shattered, pike heads drooped, crannig darts whistled, felling officers whose helms lacked faceplates. Arya's levy charged downhill in wolfhead helms, shields hammered from old kennel doors. The clash rang dull, every sound muffled by soft snow underfoot. Arya fought near the front, Valyrian dagger in left hand, a short spear in right. She gutted a Sellsword who wore the red hand of Robert's bastard rather than the skull. Spinning, she parried axe swing with spear shaft closed, buried dagger under chin guard. Blood steamed, then froze in midair. To her left a crannig net tangled 3 pikemen. Lem's mace pulped them where they writhed. Edric Storm rallied his center, and for a moment Golden Company shields advanced like a brass wall. Arya loosed the hidden dog packs then. Half-dire hounds bred from kennel strays and Nymeria's distant kin. They tore into flanks, dragging mercenaries screaming into drifts drenched pink. The battle lasted the length of a winter dusk, brief and brutal. When a horn's keening signaled retreat, less than half the Sellsword host remained. They fled east along the bank, only to plunge into rip current where ice stakes waited. The river choked red. On a boulder midstream Edric Storm fought like his namesake father, hammer-spinning arcs bright with frost. Arya watched from shore, breath fogging. She could take him with an arrow, but something in her balked. He was Robert's blood, and Robert had once stood friend to her father. History tangled with present in that spray-choked gorge. Lem forced the moment. He launched a scorpion bolt that clipped Edric's horse rump. Mount screamed, reared, and spilled Edric into torrent. When he surfaced, hammer lost, current sucked him downriver. Arya tracked his shape until mist devoured it. Whether he lived she could not tell. Afterward, the field needed tending. Dead were burned or buried, depending on snow depth. Wounded were ferried north to Winterfell. Arya found a Sellsword girl no older than 12 hiding beneath a corpse, eyes glazed in terror. She dragged the child out, saw the snapped arrow shaft lodged in thigh. The girl whimpered that her name was Arlette, taken from a river shanty by golden masters who needed banner carries. Arya cleaned the wound herself, bound it with cloth cut from her own sleeve, and ordered a sled. When Thuras corked brow, Arya murmured, "Enough dead girls." 3 nights later, as they limped through whirling snow back toward Winterfell, a raven outpaced them. It bore a scrap of purple silk and a short message burned into vellum with acid. "The lioness is caged. Bring the keys. BT." The initials puzzled some, but not Arya. Brienne of Tarth. She had captured Cersei Lannister or Jaime's sister, maybe both, somewhere on the march. The game changed. In council, Thuras argued ransom. Lem demanded immediate execution. Mira doubted proof. Arya silenced them. Cersei's cruelty birthed Frey boldness, Bolton horror, our father's death. She cut the air with a gesture. Yet her head alone feeds no fields. We will barter lion for grain, for river peace, for safe return of Sansa and any Northfolk still held. The room buzzed. Arya felt old iron settle deeper around her heart. It would be easier to thrust dagger through Cersei's cold breastbone. But Ned Stark's daughter must think beyond blood. She would trade vengeance this once for Pack. Preparations began for the journey southwest. A column of 200, stout enough to deter road bandits, lean enough to move swift. Gendry hammered rivets late into night, shaping a new gorget engraved with twin wolves, one living, one ghostly. He pressed it into her hands come dawn, cheeks soot-streaked. "For the girl and the shadow," he said. She donned it without smile, but her eyes warmed. "Ride with me?" she asked. He bowed head, soft as vow. Before departing, Arya visited the crypt one more time. She placed her mother's cloak, gray as early thaw, still scented faintly of cedar, across Catelyn's effigy. The gesture felt like closing a door whose hinges had long groaned. She whispered thanks to whatever benevolent fragment had lingered in Lady Stoneheart's shell, then turned away, footsteps lighter. The march south skirted Coldstream Gap, where thousands of white carcasses lay mounded beneath snow. The air tasted of ash and ancient sorrow, yet saplings already poked through charred soil, green tongues against white. Arya breathed their scent, stored it as promise. On the 10th day, they reached the Red Fork where Riverrun's towers mirrored golden in thaw pools. Banners fluttered atop rampart, silver trout leaping crimson field, and beside it, a blue banner quartered gold. The lion, but no Lannister inside. The sigil flew upside down, claws skyward in mock submission. Soldiers lined battlement, spears crossed in solemn salute. A horn announced entrance. Inside the yard, Brienne awaited, tall even without armor, auburn hair streaked with wind. Her eyes widened at Arya's approach. She dropped to one knee. "Lady Arya," she began. Arya shook head.
No titles.
"You kept oath to my mother. Rise." Brienne stood, face flushing. "I found Lady Sansa," she said, voice thick. "She is at the Eyrie, safe under Lady Erin's protection. The way is barred by snow, yet ravens fly." Relief threatened Arya's knees. She forced spine straight. "And Cersei Lannister? In the dungeons." Brienne's mouth twisted. "She surrendered to spare Jaime, who is grievously wounded. He sits close by, refusing maesters." Arya inhaled. "Take me to them." Through cold corridors rippling torchlight, they descended to damp stone where rats scurried. Cersei occupied a cell once meant for river poachers. She stood as they approached, shackles clinking, hair cropped jagged by rough shears but gaze still green fire. "So the wolf cub grows." Her voice carried both exhaustion and venom. "What ransom tonight? A crown? A future?" Arya answered. "Your life for food enough to pass winter and safe passage for Northfolk in Lannister Reach. Also, the castle of Harrenhal returned to House Tully." Cersei laughed, ugly, hollow. "My life is worth more than grain and stone. Without me the Iron Throne crumbles." "Then name seat price." Silence coiled, broken by distant drip of water. Cersei's shoulders sagged fraction. 800 wagons of seed grain, 50 smiths to reforge what winter stole. My son's lineage acknowledged by every northern lord. Arya weighed each demand. The last stung. Tommen the Paper King, Joffrey's echoes haunting. But seeds fed children, smiths forged plows and swords. She nodded once. "I will bring terms to Winterfell's bannermen. Fail me, and the Riverlands will watch a queen hanged like a fry." Cersei's lips curled. "I fear nothing of ropes. I have known worse collars." Arya turned away, pulse steady. In hallway outside, she found Jaime in a chair by narrow slit where sun knifed through murk. He wore rough-spun, gold hair unwashed, stump of sword hand wrapped in linen crusted brown. "Kingslayer," Arya greeted. He lifted gray eyes, tired beyond years. "Wolf girl," he coughed. "My sister lives? For now. I ask one mercy," he rasped. "Let me face her before whatever end you write. I have words still owed." Arya studied him, the once proud knight, now lined with regret. She remembered him shoving Bran from Tower. She remembered him freeing Riverrun's garrison on his honor. Too. People were puzzles, edges cut by deeds both vile and kind. "When I ride north," she said, "you may ride with me.
En parole.
One sword stroke against my people, and I finish what was begun atop that tower." Jaime bowed head. I can no longer lift a sword, he murmured. Perhaps that is penance enough. The winter sun crawled across a sky pale as tarnished silver. Riverrun buzzed with negotiation. Ravens bearing drafts of grain tallies, scribes scratching ledgers, armored envoys swearing before trout banners. Edmure Tully greeted Arya like kin, though weight of stewardship creased his brow. He pledged men and stores once his ramparts repaired. The Blackfish took Arya's measure with predator eyes, grunted approval, and began drilling levy archers to northern cadence. Amid this bustle, Arya sat one dusk with Brienne beneath barren apple trees on the riverbank. Brienne spoke of Sansa, her poise, her iron under silk, how the girl learned courtesy as a shield sharper than steel. Arya closed eyes, picturing sister weaving alliances in airy halls. For first time she imagined home not as keep of grey stone but as family reunited, a tapestry frayed yet intact. When Brienne finished, she produced a small parchment sealed with Aaron Falcon. Sansa bid me give you this. Arya broke seal. Inside, Sansa's elegant hand wrote, "Come home, little sister. The north is not lost. Bring spring." Below, a tiny ink wolf leapt. Tears blurred script. She pressed the page to heart. For a breath she allowed herself warmth, then folded it careful, tucked it under gorget plate. Spring lay distant still, but snow began to crust rather than smother. Frost thawed midday only to refleece at dusk. Arya gathered her retinue. Brienne, Gendry, Lem's half-company, 70 river knights sworn to Edmure. Jaime rode shackled but unarmed Bess. Eyed her grim. They led a wagon train guarded by trout banners. Half supplies owed Winterfell, half Lannister hostages to bargain. Northward they marched, retracing footsteps across battlefield now hushed. Carrion birds had fattened. New shoots poked through toppled helms. Spring fought. Near the ruins of Deepwood they met a column descending from stony highlands. Mountain clans under Meage Mormont, survivors of Karstark misrule, and walking before them a girl no taller than Arya's shoulder, Lyanna Mormont, voice ringing like silver blades. She saluted Arya without flinch. "Winterfell calls," she said. "We answer." Arya clasped forearms. "Your claws are welcome, my lady. And your teeth," Lyanna returned, eyes flicking to Valyrian dagger. "Let us hunt lions." Together the merged host approached Winterfell under skies streaked rose. Horns announced arrival. Gates creaked open. Children shouted from rampart. Wolves howled. And in the courtyard Arya saw familiar hair the color of burnished copper. Sansa, wrapped in pale blue mantle embroidered white weirwood leaves. Beside her, Bran sat in a carved chair drawn by Hodder's younger brother. His eyes, one earthly hazel, one pale milky, regarded Arya as though reading pages no one else could see. He smiled, small and secret. Arya slid from saddle. Sansa walked forward, poise fracturing to speed. They collided in fierce embrace. For a time words failed. Hearts spoke in pulses against ribs. When they parted, tears traced both faces. "You're alive," Sansa whispered. "Burning," Arya replied. They laughed, shaky. Bran's thin voice drifted. "The pack is stronger together." Gendry approached, clearing throat. Arya turned. "Sister," she said to Sansa. "This is family," Sansa guessed, eyes soft. Gendry flushed, ducked. Then voices rose. Lem barking orders, Lyanna greeting Meage, ravens fluttering overhead. Jaime removed shackles and knelt before Bran's chair, murmuring apology none could hear. Bran listened, then rested pale hand on the Kingslayer's crown of gold hair. Absolution perhaps, or forewarning. Night blanketed Winterfell under banners of dire wolf and trout, bear and spear maiden, Crannog reeds and smith's hammer. A feast began. Thin barley stew, half-thawed carrots, salted boar, meager, but laced with gratitude richer than any king's landing coursed meal. Songs caught on smoky rafters. The North remembers, the last hearth lament, even a bawdy tune about a wolf maid and a bull that made Gendry choke on ale while Sansa smiled behind cup. Amid it, Arya slipped outside. She walked the snowy yard till she reached the empty kennels. Stars glittered overhead. The air smelled of pine, resin, and promise. A single wolf howl drifted from distant woods. Deep, resonate, familiar. Nymeria. Arya closed eyes, letting the sound fill bones. She pictured her direwolf queen running under moon, leading massive pack through still pines, wild and free yet forever tethered. Steps crunched behind, light, deliberate. She turned to Gendry. "I thought you'd rest," she said. "Not till you do." They faced one another beneath starlight broken by chimney smoke. Breath mingled white. Gendry produced an object wrapped in cloth and offered it. Arya unfolded to find a wolf's head wrought in near-black steel, pommel for a short sword. "I forged it of sky metal from a fallen star," he said, voice rough. "Light, sharp, true. A blade for new life, not old death." Arya traced the snout, swollen with strength. "Does it have a name?" He shrugged. "Names are yours to give." She considered, memory flicking past 1,000 faces, settling on one. "Respite," she whispered, "because someday there will be." He smiled, hope softening battle lines around mouth. "I'll craft the blade come dawn," he promised. Arya sheathed imaginary sword at side, then, almost shy, took his soot-scarred hand. They stood thus while the north sang behind them, songs of loss, of rise, of stubborn green shoots in snow. Above, the sky rippled with pale curtains of light. Arya raised her face, letting auroras paint skin. Tomorrow council would convene to haggle grain, to weigh Cersei's fate, to prepare roads for armies yet unwon. But tonight, beneath unblinking stars, Arya Stark allowed warmth to seep through cracks Lady Stoneheart left. She was steel, yes, but tempered by fire and quenched now in something gentler. Call it hope, call it pack, call it the hush between knife strikes where life gathers breath. She would fight again. Winter was not done. Yet spring had found a foothold, here in the yard of her fathers, and that was worth one stolen heartbeat of peace. A second howl rose, closer, joined by others in swelling chorus. Arya's heart answered in silent echo. She squeezed Gendry's fingers and stepped forward into the song, head high, cloak swirling like dawn's first crimson streak across horizon. And somewhere beyond snow-laden pines, Nymeria lifted her mighty throat and gave the night to wolves.